Just doing a mic check. Check, check. 1, 2, 3. Just give us a second, guys. We're just about to get started. Hey everybody, sorry I was just improvising some extra lighting there so you could see me better. I hope everyone's doing well. Hello SMSV, hi everybody. Today we are gonna go for our second part of the Seniors Intergenerational Healthy Lifestyle Community Program. And basically today what we're gonna do is start getting into detail and in depth with neck and low back pain. But before we get on to that, how about we start with a little bit of a review from last day. So I got myself, I'm Dr. Daniel Dimitri, and we also have Shannon. Shannon, come here. So here's
Hi,
Shannon.
everyone.
And Shannon's going to be covering the next hour after my presentation here. She's going to be doing a whole bunch of exercises. She's also a chiropractor. She works in Guelph. I work in Waterloo. And we're excited. I hope you are too.
See you all soon.
All right. So this is what I want to start with. And we're going to just go hot and heavy before we go into a quick review. Movement, whether it's jumping up and down or even just moving something side to side, stretching, just activities in general, things you love to do. Movement's a sign of life. It gives us life. Just like being stagnant has the opposite effect. And there's a lot to go off of this. So I'm just going to switch cameras here so you could see me a little bigger. There we go. So I got a story for you guys. My mom, she loves birds so much that she has 3 of them, has 2 of them now actually. But she's had so many in the past. And growing up, you know, one of the things you have to do with your bird, if you have a pet bird, especially if you want to keep them safe and you don't want them to fly towards a window and just smack the window because they think that it's just open and they can go outside, for example. And that usually happens in the beginning when you first get them home. You clip an under part of their wings, just on this area, just not the full wing, of course, but just the tips of the feathers. And of course it's painless. They don't really have nerves that go out that far. And all it does is it makes it hard for them to take flight. So every time we get these birds, little cute budgies, and we also have a really cute big cockatiel, her name's Cookie. We'd clip the wings a little bit, and then we'd see that immediately after, they still try to fly. And they don't stop. They'll just jump up and fly, and you'll just see them go, and they just sink down. But the thing is that regardless of what's happening, and Mom, you could swear by this, you could see them trying to learn and adapt. And you can see animals in general, they just try to move, regardless of what kind of disability they might think. They don't perceive it as a disability. They just go for it. They don't care. They go for it. Of course, in the wild, it's do or die, it's survival. But if you have any pets of your own, you might notice it too. If they got hurt, they still move. They don't stop. They keep moving. And if your pet is not moving and is stagnant or just still or just sitting in a corner somewhere, that's usually when you take them to a vet or to an animal hospital. That's when you know it's really bad. And the same is with us. Movement itself, it's more than just exercise. We often associate mobility and movement and staying active and all of the things. I'm sure you've all seen many presentations and many advertisements, and many times people have said to you, you need to move, you need to be active, you need to exercise. But really, it's the whole idea of movement, the concept of being active, the concept of having mobility. That idea in itself is so powerful, and it's not just about exercise. It's about loving the idea of mobility, loving that concept. And we're going to get into that a lot, and it's going to sound like I'm a broken record. Low back pain, you got to move. Your car tire is lacking air and it's flat, move. You're hungry, move. I'm joking, but you're going to hear me saying it a lot, and we're going to get into that. But really, the whole idea with this is, even when you go to a therapist, you go to a chiropractor, you go to a physiotherapist, what do they do when people are injured? They help you move, whether it's therapy through manipulation or manual therapy or stretching or strengthening. It's always movement related. And that's a very powerful thought. I'm going to bring us back to this slide right here. This is part of our recap. So last day, it was really just a big introduction into what we're going to go over today. And one concept that I was talking about was what it meant to be healthy. And I just want to touch on that again. Being healthy, kind of like this diagram I put together in no particular order, it encompasses multiple factors. It's multifaceted. It is a component, related to physical activity, our cognitive stability, our spirituality, what we put in our bodies, our food, our relationships with others and with ourselves, and also condition management. I like to put condition management on the very lowest tier of where to go with someone's health when they want to get healthier, because sometimes, especially when it's things like pain, we tend to just tunnel vision and focus. And when I say we, I mean practitioners, on the condition and not the person as a whole and what kind of goals they have or what they're looking for. And it's very important to really think about that. I'm going to go back to that slide in a second, but first, just to recap, mindset, exercise, and practices. This is what we started talking about the other day, about how to get started and how to really take, looking into your health and taking care of yourself from like a really, really focused direction. So we're talking about looking at our mindset, how we set goals, how we perceive our pain, also looking into exercise and our practices of that. So in addition to that, I just wanted to touch in again with spirituality, nutrition, condition management, relationships, cognitive stability, physical activity. I'm not telling you that this has to be perfect, but what I'm trying to say is, if you take a moment and see where those areas kind of lack a little bit, or you feel like you can improve, or you feel like you want to improve, those are really great areas to start to think about. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. It sounds a little bit foreign. Let's just go back to the presentation. I just realized I didn't have the slide up, but here it is. So we were talking about this diagram here, the overall encompassing what's healthy in general and what things or components or pillars of our health that we want to pay attention to. And just going back to what I said about the concept of movement, it's a sign of life. It gives us life, and just like being stagnant has an opposite effect. So when you look at this kind of graphic here, whether it's spirituality or nutrition or physical activity or cognitive stability, if we're moving, we're constantly in action, in a period of action, that's when things begin to change. Getting still, getting stale just has the opposite effect. And oftentimes, clinically, when I see a patient and I'm just trying my best to explain to them the importance of movement, what I often like to describe it as is just any kind of mechanism, a bicycle, an engine, a gear, a lever, something outdoors. If it doesn't move and it's not being used for a long time, what ends up happening? Tends to rust, tends to get jammed. And if you've ever had a moment like that, even a faucet, a little water faucet outside, it can jam if it doesn't move, if it just stays there out in the rain, and then it starts to rust and oxidize. And maybe some people would compare that to something like arthritis, where we think that, if it's rusty, it's no good. That's not true at all. If it's rusty, all you got to do is just get it moving, get some lubrication in there, and make it just be active all the time. You take a rusty faucet and you keep spinning it every day and you use it, It's not going to be stuck or jammed or rusty. It's going to be fine. And that's the same idea. Same with our spirituality. If we have a relationship with our own spirituality, our faith, if we're stagnant, it's the same thing. It's the same with our nutrition. If we stop being conscious and taking time with preparing meals and really appreciate that process and our relationship with the meals that we eat, again, we don't get the full benefit of what it can do for our own health. So, one important thing that I really wanted us to focus on is this word possible. And I remember mentioning to you guys, it's not just about living as long as possible. It's about living for as healthy as you can for as long as possible. And that's what we're here to help you with. We're not here just to beat in your brain that movement or mobility is just it. No, it's not just about that. It's what we're trying to do is show you how to do that, show you safe ways, condition specific things. If someone does have a specific type of injury or pain or a concept or feeling, even if we think, okay, I'm getting too old to do this or that or this or that, that's not necessarily true. It's just that the framework changes and our mindset changes and our parameters change, not for better or for worse, but just change. And when we accept things that way, we really begin to see and understand what it is we need to do to be able to accomplish whatever it is. If it's a goal, if it's an activity, if it's a milestone, if it's something we want to be there for. If we want to see our great-grandkids get married, you want to be there for it, not just be alive for it, but actually be there for it. Those kind of goals are things that we can talk about. So, just as an introduction, how many of you wake up in the morning feeling like this? Sometimes I do. This is a picture I saw a while ago and I just can't get it out of my head because it's hilarious. We're going to talk about neck and low back pain today. We're going to talk about general anatomy. We're going to get a little gritty with that. Going to get into detail. And, for the anatomists out there, I might not go too in detail, but all I'm out here to do is just try and help you develop a little bit more of an appreciation for what it is we have. But the other goal of looking into anatomy and understanding our human composition is to grasp a few concepts. One of them being, we are very durable. The human body can withstand a whole lot. We're not as fragile as you think. The reason that the hospitals can be busy at times or the clinic can be busy with people that are hurting at times is because we're complex. As much as we are durable, we have a lot happening in this physical body and this non-physical consciousness. And that being said, there's many areas where certain hiccups along the road can happen. It doesn't mean that we're fragile. It doesn't mean that. All it means is that we have to set our framework and understand exactly what it is that we are dealing with at the time. Understand our barriers to reaching our goals. And I know I'm talking a lot. I'm rambling. I have an hour to keep talking, so just get comfy and we'll just keep going at it. So today, we're going to do an in-depth review of neck and low back pain. So we're going to talk about common conditions. I'm not going to be listing every possible kind of neck pain, every possible kind of back pain. Not at all. Because the truth is, with the exception of a few conditions, most of them have very similar types of causes and also very similar ways to approach management. So I will get fairly general for your sake because it doesn't really make sense to list 100 conditions that you might not even remember. But I will talk about common ones and just general trends. We're going to look into some anatomy. I want to start right from the developmental years as a child, look into CS, TS, and LS. What that means is cervical spine, thoracic spine, and lumbar spine. And I'm going to explain what all of those words mean, but basically they're just sections of our spine. Today, we're going to look at spinal health. Next week, we're going to talk about hip, knee, and ankle. The week after that, we're going to be all over the upper extremities. The week after that, we're going to talk about heart health, cardiovascular strength, diet control, and general health. And we're going to start to wrap up at that point. We're going to talk about some causes of pain. Again, we're going to get fairly general because I can seriously talk about this for years and years and years and still not have enough time. And then we're also going to talk about management and prevention, and the same there as well. Okay, so here we go. Let's just go right in hot here. Curves, baby. So essentially, our spines do have a very unique shape. And I'm going to show you some pretty cool 3D animations of what that can look like in a minute. But before we go into that, just to appreciate how our developmental milestones go. At birth, from infancy, we start with something that looks like a C curve. If you can see, I just drew some lines around these pictures here. You have a really cute baby here. So you can see our spine just currently at this time, it's pretty much, babies are, they're like bags of cartilage. They're really cute bags of cartilage, but they don't really have full development of bones yet. And that's a whole other physiological process that's very beautiful. But at this point, babies are very flexible. One of the reasons being is during delivery, birth giving, they need to have a certain amount of pliability and just general elasticity to come out without being harmed. So that's one of the reasons. Second reason is obviously to reach skeletal maturity. You can't do that in the womb. As a child grows, so do their bones. Their bones begin to grow and develop. Literally, they start to build themselves from a small little cartilage core. They start to grow out, and eventually you get a bone. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's the general idea. Point is, right at birth pretty much, the general curvature of the spine looks like a C, almost like the thing you see drawn right there. As a child begins to get tummy time, stays on their belly, and starts to look up, they start to develop something called cervical lordosis, which is exactly the curve you see there. This curve right here is cervical lordosis here. The opposite of lordosis is this curve here, which is like this way, curving into a ball, which is called kyphosis. When we look in the first picture from birth, most of the posture or just description of the spine shape is kyphotic. It is mostly a kyphosis, a C curve. Eventually, when they start lifting up their head and developing all of these muscles here, and at a young age, at infancy, babies begin to grow fast, and I'm sure you know that. They start to develop that cervical means neck, lordosis. After that, they begin to try to walk and crawl, and they begin to develop in their low back also a lordosis, which means the same way that low back, that neck is curving, the low back begins to curve. The mid back remains as a kyphosis, and the reason being is our thorax, which is why, like, our thorax is our main chest area here where most of our vitals are, our lungs, our heart, even part of our liver comes up here. We have our stomach tucked under our thorax, and many other organs that are very vital to human function. The reason that this area is generally just bigger here and that back curves in a kyphotic direction is because we want as much space for this rib cage to just protect and enclose our most precious organs. It's allowing us to have a lot of space in there. It also gives us space for our lungs to expand and contract, and our diaphragm, which controls the pressure inside our lungs when we breathe. Pretty much. All of that needs space. That's why our thoracic spine is also very mobile in certain directions, and we're going to get into exactly how each section moves. So I hope this just kind of helps you understand that we're not just born with this posture of having an S-shaped spine. It develops over time based on what we need to do. The reason that a child at the age of 6 months to 2 years begins to develop lordosis in the low back is to prepare a person for walking, to be able to be upright. That's why babies take at least 6 months or so to start walking, and then it gets easier as those days go. And before they're 2 years old, walking's not really that seriously easy. They're still a little clumsy. And the whole reason is their center of gravity is not fully where it's going to be. That lordosis really does help shift our weight to be right above our feet. In addition to, of course, as children develop, more muscles begin to grow and strengthen, and they start to cognitively develop better learning strategies just to learn how to walk, just like we learn how to do anything. Walking in itself is an insanely complex and beautiful mechanic that we take like an everyday thing. We're walking. But walking in itself is so crazy how it even happens, let alone complex movements. Like, let's start with running. Did you know when you're running, between steps for a brief period of time, you are airborne, and then you land, and then you're airborne again, and then you land, and then you're airborne again. And people run for hours and hours and hours. This morning, I just treated an ultramarathon runner where yesterday he ran 50 kilometers just after dinner. And that kind of concept is so crazy to me, to know that our bodies are so capable and so durable. And just by design, we are meant to be on 2 feet. We are bipedal, which means we have 2 feet. And pedal, spelt like pedal of a bicycle, literally means to ambulate, to move, and to propel. That being said, I want you all to put your thinking caps on, because it's about to get a little bit technical. We're going to start talking about some anatomy, so I hope you're ready. If you need a water break, now's the time to do it. And I'm just going to pull up a diagram here. There we are. I got 2 different models here. We'll start with this one first, just because I want to show something. Just touching on the appreciation for our bodies and the level of layering that we have. And if you're in the medical field or just have an interest in human anatomy, my apologies for the repetition. I'm not going to go through a full anatomy lesson here, but what I will do is just help remind you guys and reframe where we're at with how well built we are. And starting there, I would like for you all to start to grasp the idea of, once you start to know what structures, like say you have neck pain and shoulder pain in this area, if you understand how these muscles and joints and nerves interact with one another and what function they serve, you will better be able to independently troubleshoot. And you will be able to distill fears of your own and just work towards finding ways to move it. If you can understand how something can move, then you can know how to move it yourself. And one thing I just want to preface with is, a lot of our muscles are like pulleys. And when I'm talking about pulleys, I'm not talking about the obvious that you pull something and it moves. I'm talking about the line of the pulley, the actual trajectory of it. If we have a muscle, I'm sure you've seen pictures with lines through the muscle. Those are called striations. The striations of a muscle often, actually always, with the exception of some muscles like our heart, because it's just different. Striations themselves show the direction of the action of the muscle. So that alone can really help. If you can see, just like a pulley, if your pulley goes this way, I'm not going to make it do work over there. I'm not going to pull something here to make a weight over here lift or move. I'm going to make it so that the weight here pulls up. Do you get what I'm saying? So let's look at this diagram here for a second. All I'm going to do is start taking layers off. He's just a pretty muscular guy. He looks pretty happy to be here. His name's Bill. So we're going to just start taking layers off, and I'm going to stop at the most superficial layer beneath the skin. Here we have a really big section where our shoulders are, going down into our mid-back. Those are our trapezius muscles here. They kind of coat through all of the other structures in the upper back, almost, just like you see here. You can kind of see when I rotate a little bit, and if we scroll in a bit too, you can kind of see this area here. You'll see that the trapezius muscles go all the way to here, and oftentimes it's this muscle that people find gets fairly stiff. And One of the reasons is we carry our shoulders up here when we're nervous, or we're here and we breathe from the chest. And these shoulders here start to work a lot all the time. And it often translates to neck pain, where that trapezius muscle inserts right to the base of your skull. If you can see in this image, if I can highlight it, I don't think I can. There we go. You can actually see where it inserts. And by insert, I mean attaches. One of the movements it does is helps you raise your head up. But it's a very dominant muscle. And that being said, it tends to be overworked when the rest of the muscles all around the neck here. So if I just remove this muscle here, all of these muscles here are not doing enough work. So we end up getting neck pain because they're overworked but underworked, if that makes sense. Just think of someone who never went to the gym before, and then you brought him with you as a friend, or whatever. It doesn't have to be the gym. You made a friend who never exercises do a bunch of landscaping work outside with you, and they get so sore the next day. That's the same as muscles being underworked but overworked. Now, if we start taking more layers off, we're just going to zoom out a little bit here. I'm just going to rip through a whole bunch of muscular structures just so we could look at the spine here for a second. Right here, you can see how much fortification just our skeletal structure has. When I zoom out and I show you these muscles here, these are basically called spinal muscles. They sit on that bed of the spine, almost 2 inches to 4 inches deep in the low back, just providing support to the low back and to the neck. When we take out that layer there and we start looking here, we have this really big looking like fish fin right here. This is called the Ligamentum Nuclei. And what that's responsible for is pretty much adding incredible amounts of support and strength to our entire spine, from the base of our skull all the way down to our tailbone. And if we were to scroll all the way down, you can almost see that fin just going all the way down to our tailbone. This is our hip here, and you can see our sacrum. And all of this white here that you see that looks like cobwebs, all of that is ligamentous support. These structures can handle hundreds of pounds, if not more than hundreds of pounds. Of course, at the base of the neck, it's called the Ligamentum Nuclei. But as you start to see that it's kind of in between the spine here, between those big spikes of the spine, they're just in between, those are called interspinous ligaments. But we don't just have that. We have this beautiful looking train track system connecting those forks coming out of our spine. If you see that, those forks on the bone of the spine is called a transverse process. And they're responsible for a whole bunch of muscles to attach to it, to cause it to rotate and move and extend and rotate and pivot and just do all sorts of crazy movements. But what's even more cool is this ligament just threads through and connects all the bones together again on both sides. And these are called Inter-Transverse Ligaments. And they go all the way from our neck. You can see it here. I don't know if you can see that. Let's zoom in a little bit. Can you see this cable here? Just traveling all the way from C1, from the very first vertebrae of the neck. And it will go all the way down the spine. This guy right here. If I click it, you can see them. I just isolated that for you. That being said, not only do we have that, if we zoom in right here, and I'm gonna slow down with all of the ligament talk in a second. There's another ligament right here. I just kind of highlighted that. That protects your spinal cord from the back part of the spine, because everything's in 3D. That's called the posterior longitudinal ligament. And what that does is it also protects your spinal cord, which is the whole point of having a spine in general, from any other structure in the area. And it also provides an incredible amount of rigidity to our spine. Now you might say, Daniel, why are you talking so much about how rigid our bodies are? You know, I could just sit here and talk about your discs and how it's like a big jelly donut and it can squish and explode, but that's just not true. we are able to handle so much force and wear and usage on our spines. It's absolutely incredible. I'm just going to move to a different anatomy dissector here, just because I like it better for showing nerves, because we're going to get into pain a little bit. When we look here, this is again just a human being. We're just looking at him from the back of the neck. You can see the trapezius muscle there. Now, if we rotate it a little bit, there we are. You can see these little yellow lines that kind of travel all along the outside of the skin on the trapezius muscle there. Those nerves are basically called, they're spinous nerves that sense pain on the skin. But if we were to dissect just a little bit, so this is what I was talking about here. You could kind of see. So this is called the spinal nerve. There's a lot of them. And if you ever feel like tingling and numbness in this area and it just feels burning and weird, just doesn't feel right, but also pain, and you get neck pain, it's oftentimes these nerves here that get irritated. Let's just start taking layers off of this guy, but we're going to select which layers. So we're going to take off the trapezius muscle there, and I hope you can see where we're looking now. You can kind of see those spinal nerves. If we just rotate, kind of changes. You ever wonder why you get headaches from the back of your head when your neck hurts, and if you push on a point, you feel referral points? We have those nerves up there. Right back here, this is called the greater occipital nerve, right here on the right side. You can see that. I just canceled the one on the left. And again, they just sense pressure, irritation, and they give you a signal of pain, but doesn't mean that you're in trouble. Not necessarily. I just took off the trapezius muscle. Let's take off another layer, and you can start to see that ligamentum nuclei there, just kind of poking out that big, beautiful white ligament there. We're just going to take off more layers. We don't need to talk about which muscles are what. Generally speaking, any muscle can be in pain. Any complex or area can be in pain, depending on the direction of the movement and just the way that an area is being loaded consistently. I just wanted to show you a little bit closer into the spine. So I took off a whole bunch of layers. We're just going to take it off from the left side so you could really see. There we are. Just for a second here, can you appreciate how deep our spine actually is in comparison to these muscles? Look where they are. I just highlighted one right there. Those yellow things in the background, like the one I just clicked there, for example, right back there, and it kind of passes through out of the neck into the arms. There's hundreds of nerves coming out from the neck. What I'm trying to show you, though, is how much fortification and how much complexity there is. So if you do visit any kind of manual therapist and they just pinpoint one muscle that's the problem, it's oftentimes not the issue. It's oftentimes related to our general movements. For example, 80% of the work that our neck needs to do to keep our head upright should be done by these muscles here. If we were to take away these two flat muscles, this right here is called the platysma. It's what keeps your face and skin tight here. If I smile, you see those lines? That's the platysma muscle there. If we just take it out, you see a really big muscle here. This one right there. If I'm holding it, it's this guy right there. It's called the Sternocleidomastoid. Again, it inserts right to the base of the skull, right behind the ear. You can kind of see that. Do you see what I'm talking about with the lines of the muscle? It's like a pulley. What this muscle does makes me check my blind point this way. This movement here. Looking that way. Checking your shoulder. Oftentimes that gets really hurt with side impacts when someone gets in a bad car accident, knock on wood. But let's just look into what actually does the work for keeping our neck up. So let's take that layer off. Sternocleidomastoid gone. Whoa, what are all these muscles here just around our throat? These muscles are called our deep neck flexors, our deep neck flexor muscles. One of them being the longus colli muscle, which is one of the most important ones for keeping our neck up. Oftentimes when you see You might look in the mirror and you might notice, or someone takes a picture of you without a warning and you're kind of here, like that. That muscle's just completely off. It's not doing anything. It contracts when you tuck in your chin and you do a nice double chin. And here, just as a little break, I want to show you how to contract it. You're going to just pull your chin in and try to give me the thickest double chin. Look, I'm giving myself a double chin in front of hundreds of people. Let's go. If I show you from the side, when you pull that muscle back, that's me doing it a little bit extreme just to show you what the movement's like. But that muscle is responsible for keeping our heads up when it's not doing the amount of work that it should be, because we're not using it much. We're using cell phones, we're using computers, we're looking down on our phones like this, looking at your monitor, sitting on a couch, sleeping on a pillow. All of these changes from modern life with our ancient bodies is showing its effect as pain in the neck. It's showing its effect as pretty much not as much strength, headaches, constant strain in the eyes, and other issues that can happen, right? Eventually, if these guys aren't working much, what else is going to work? Remember, we talked about pulleys. That trapezius goes right to the base of the skull. It's just going to pulley us up this way. And we end up getting a lot of neck pain right here. Lots and lots of neck pain. And again, if we can just try to take load off of there, it can get easier here. I think that's a lot of anatomy for the neck. If I were to just try and isolate just the skeletal system, so let's see, how do I do that? Okay. So looking down a little bit, and then we're going to move on. But just looking down into the low back. Same thing applies. Our low back, on the outside, you see all this white on the low back here? That's called the thoracolumbar fascia. The thoracolumbar fascia is responsible pretty much for tightening up all of our muscles that insert into our low back, into our hips, our pelvis, the big bones right on our hip here, right here. A lot of muscles insert there. A lot of them being our latissimus dorsi, the thing that pulls us up when we're doing a pull-up, or our gluteal muscles, every step we take, every time you stand up from a seating posture, all of those muscles attach in that area generally. If we were to just take off some layers, again, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's close to 4.5 inches between the skin and the bone. So that being said, it's so fortified, and it's also, just think about it this way. A car has horsepower. If you have a car with 100 horsepower, that's great. If you have a car with 300 horsepower, it's faster. Same thing here. We have hundreds of muscles inserting into areas of our spine and our back and our legs and our body in general, designed to each one at a time take load off of focused structures that are important. You can also see those nerves coming out on the back there, that yellow stuff right here. Those are called clunial nerves. They're responsible for causing referral of burning and pain in the low back as well, sometimes into the buttock. Sometimes if people have mid-back pain, they get pain referring into their buttock. I'm not talking about sciatica. I'm going to talk about sciatica, but not quite yet. But I'm just explaining that there's also skin nerves that could just be irritated that very simply could be addressed. If we were to just take a layer off here, we're going to go a little deeper. I'm going to go a little deeper than that, so we're just going to keep taking layers off. You can see this long, beautiful muscle here, all the way from your tailbone, all the way pretty much to the base of your skull. This is called the lumbar paraspinal muscle. Paraspinal means it's partnered with the spine. It follows the spine all the way up to your neck. If we just go a deeper layer than that, and we just take these ones out, we start to see some pretty important structures. One of them being here. So looking deep in here, we could start to see the spine a little more. There we go. And you can see just a Christmas tree of muscles. What is that? That Christmas tree, part of it is called the multifidus muscle. Oftentimes, people feel like their pain is deep low back pain. That muscle can be affected. And if someone says that they're going to go in there and massage it and put their thumb into that muscle, I take that with a grain of salt because it's the deepest muscle right against the bone, and it's really hard to cause an impression with your hand in that area. Better yet, you could contract it though by moving your pelvis. And today, Dr. Shannon's going to go over ways to move these. The reason that I'm so focused on the muscle and not necessarily bone today, actually muscle and ligament, is because oftentimes pain is related to muscle soreness or muscle pain, chronic overuse, chronic strain, spraining of ligaments. It's not quite often related to a bone being worn out and a disc being blown out of proportion. Yes, we do have discs in between every spinal level that can be a little squished or sometimes flatten out. But I'm telling you, I've seen x-rays and x-rays and x-rays of people who have very bad arthritis in their spine. They're coming for a shoulder complaint, and they can put their palms flat on the ground and do yoga, and they don't have any low back pain. And there's a lot of evidence, there's a large body of literature that supports the same kind of concept, that not necessarily does arthritis or bony changes in the spine mean low back pain. Better yet, 87% of low back pain cases tend to resolve within 30 to 60 days on their own. And that's also indicative of the fact that muscle pain tends to do the same. I just want to talk about pain for a second here, and then we're going to talk about sciatica just as an example of a type of pain. I'm just trying to get out of this presentation here. Okay. There we go. Injuries in general, and the reason I'm not getting too specific is because I just want to explain a concept. I also don't have a lot of time, but injuries in general, I want you to picture a scale. You have your capacity to perform a task, capacity to mentally handle a situation, capacity to do certain things within a certain frame of time, capacity, your ability. And then you have demand. What the world is asking of you, what you're asking of you, what this physical job is asking of you, and your demand is going to talk to your capacity. But guess what? Demand doesn't care. Demand's going to happen. One way or another, it's going to happen. You got to wake up, you got to go to work. If you're retired right now, you got to wake up and you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go take a shower, you got to get dressed, meet some friends, you got to, if you have a hobby or a project or a side business that you're running as after you're retired, you got to go do it. If you're into gardening, you got to go do it. If you love to cook, you got to go do it. And oftentimes I hear, yeah, I'm doing it, but I'm in so much pain. And this concept is very strong once you get it. Injuries happen when a tissue is loaded beyond its capacity to handle that load. Period. Injuries happen when a tissue is loaded beyond its capacity to handle that load. So think of any kind of machine, or just take a trampoline. It's bouncy, it's nice, it works. Once you put something too heavy there and you drop it from a skyscraper, boom, it rips the trampoline. Maybe that's a little bit of an aggressive example, but I really want you to visualize the idea of what happens if I pull my capacity up. Capacity's up. So now it's a heavy capacity and the demand is light. Put that on the scale and the capacity outweighs the demand with buffer. You have extra space to do what you want. Injuries suddenly don't happen. And if you think back to a time when you were really physically active and something that you loved and enjoyed to do, you would find the same, that pain was probably less. And the less that you do that thing or the less that you move, pain gets more the next time you go out and do it. So just last week I had a patient come in and she plays a lot of tennis and squash. And obviously with the lockdown, she hasn't played for, I'd say, a year now. But recently she moved to a new place that has a tennis court in a park like right down the street from her, and it's outdoors, and she just goes alone in the morning, like 5 a.m. to practice. And she's like, I stopped. I went once and that was it. I was out. I couldn't move for like 3 days. I had to take days off of work. Well, you just went from training like 5 days a week, exercising. Mind you, this patient's about 70 years old. She went from being very regular. She was going to a community center with another group of friends 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. She'd have her morning coffee with her husband and then go to the squash court place and meet with her friends and do this. She went from doing that daily to not doing it for a year to just getting back into it, like boom, just practicing right away. And I asked her, was her pain debilitating? She said maybe for the first 2 days, muscles got sore, but she just knee-jerk reflex reaction, right? Just immediately thought that it was bad for her and that she's getting old. So I told her, how about you just start kind of gradually practicing it? So go in there for 5 minutes on Monday and then just practice a little bit, call it. Next day, go in for 10. Next day, go in for 20 minutes. This is by no means like a long-term graduated plan. It's 5 days of like going from 5 minutes to 10 minutes on day 2 to 15 minutes on day 3 to like a full hour on a Friday. And it was fine. It's almost like she just had to get herself back into gear, back into the groove. Looking at something like sciatic nerve or sciatica is just an example because this is a buzzword. I hear sciatica all the time and it's usually not even sciatica. But generally, our spinal cord goes from our brain all the way down our back, all the way down to our tailbone. From there, though, on every level of our spine, we have 7 vertebrae in the neck, 12 in the mid-back, and 5 in the low back. Out of every level, we have nerves, just highways coming out of those levels of the spine and supplying the rest of the body with electricity, stimulation to our muscles to do their job. The sciatic nerve supplies pretty much all the muscles on the back of your leg, from your bum to your hamstring, that's the back of your leg, to your calf muscles. They're responsible for making you get on your tippy toes and back down. They're responsible for walking upstairs and even walking downstairs. That's one division of nerves. Oftentimes it gets pinched by this mean muscle called the piriformis, where it just gets painful. The muscle gets very swollen sometimes. It could just be inflamed. It could be strained. It's responsible for rotating your hip. Doesn't matter at this point. But basically it tends to irritate that sciatic nerve. It's called the sciatic nerve because I don't remember some meaning in Latin that I will confirm for you guys in a bit. But basically what I'm trying to say is sciatica means that there's nerve referral of pain. And people often feel numbness and tingling and pain when they sit or when they try to walk or when they try to do activities like just standing and cooking and working on a workshop or doing anything that requires using their gluteal muscles, using their bum muscles a lot. There's so many different cases like this. People get thoracic outlet syndrome or carpal tunnel syndrome, and these are all just nervous issues where the nerve gets a little irritated. It can revert, it can go away, it can go away on its own, but usually and ultimately it happens as a result of pulling up your own capacity to do that. So one thing that I see often is, this is a funny picture I came across. When the MRI results come back normal, but the pain is still there, is it a green light or a red light? Like, what do I do at this point? Honestly, if the MRI came back normal, what that means is there's no random growth or life-threatening thing happening in that area. There's no crazy amount of like nerve pinching, or I'm talking about things that are called constitutional signs and symptoms or things that cause harm for life. MRIs and X-rays ideally should be used to rule out things that are life-threatening, but not give implications for disability and pain unless it really does mean disability and pain. If an MRI result comes back normal, but your back just hurts all the time, sometimes it's worth just taking a step back and having an open mind and just giving it a shot. Yeah, go see your physio, go see your chiro. They can help with pain management, but ultimately, what's the cure is going to be understanding what's happening and using that area without fear and moving as much as possible. This was also a funny picture, which I've seen so many people say this. I'm done. I did something yesterday. So why does our back hurt all the time? And this is why my answers or my descriptions seem to not say, well, your back is caused because you have bad posture. You have neck pain because your posture is bad. That's just not true. Your back hurts because you were squatting or you were walking with poor form, or you have degenerative disc disease or degenerative joint disease, or someone has a slipped disc. All of this kind of language, it's obsolete. It doesn't mean much. Sure, we can put a name to what somebody's experiencing, but it doesn't mean that that's it. It's the end. It's over. That's what I have. Pain in general is multidimensional. And when we start to appreciate what that means, it really does change our outcomes for getting better. So looking here, when I think multidimensional, I think in three ways. I think of the mechanism of the injury. Of course, somebody slipped on a patch of slippery ice, they hit their back, they hit their bum, now it's sore, or someone sneezed really hard and they felt a little pop in their upper back, and now every time they breathe it hurts. Maybe it's a rib that's irritated, who knows? We have to find out. That's the injury. That's pretty much, usually people put 60% emphasis on this. Let's put 20%. Let's put 10% emphasis on this. As long as something isn't broken or someone's not super truly sick, let's just put 10 to 20% emphasis on the injury. Beliefs and practices, though. I was told I have a slipped disc. How many of you might think that or say that, or were told you have a slipped disc? Well, I showed you this anatomy to help you conceptualize that it's not really that possible to walk around with a disc in the spine that has slipped and stayed slipped. They are so absorbent that they do just go back in on their own. Yes, there are exercises. There's a lot of studies done on ways to make that process faster and to help prevent it. But guess how it's done? It's done with exercise. Something called the Mckenzie protocol for disc hernia is just an exercise series pulling the back into extension because of the way the physics of the back works down there. It sucks the disc back in. Same with, in general, our injuries tend to just get better depending on how we believe it does and what happens in that sense. If we believe that we're not made to get better, if we believe that we had something happen and ever since that moment, we are now going to have this disability follow us forever, that's when things change our outcomes, especially when it comes to aging and growing. If we believe that as we age, we just lose our ability to do, that will become a reality. And that's exactly what I hope that I can influence you to change, is change your beliefs into just giving it a shot. And then your practices. That's what we talked about last week. Bed rest is not really the practice I'm talking about here. Yes, bed rest when it's warranted. But remember, just like an animal, when you see them sleeping, or like not sleeping, but not moving because they're hurt and sick, you're taking them to the hospital. So we're going to start doing neck and low back mobility routines. We're going to have exercises. Dr. Shannon's going to go through all of those with you. I hope you guys are psyched up for that. I'm really excited. And she's literally just putting her shoes on now. She's getting ready. Just remember a few things from last day. Chop wood, carry water. We got to just keep going. It might not look pretty. It might not look fancy. It might not look like the next new exercise. But all of today was about we're durable. Our anatomy is very intricate and complex. And I think you can tell that I could literally spend 5 hours just talking about the anatomy of the muscles in the neck, and it still won't be enough. But that's not the point. The whole idea is understand and appreciate how much help we have here. Our bodies are magnificent, and they're resilient, and they're adaptive, and we are intelligent. And I've only been talking about our physical body from a mechanic side, but there's a cognitive side to the way that we move and heal. We're going to get into that slowly. I just wanted today to be a little bit of an anatomy intro. I'm learning as I present this as well in terms of how to deliver this kind of information. So any feedback's helpful for us. Next episode, Just like PB and J are in love, we're going to talk about the hip, knee, and ankle complex. Hold on, I'll go back to that picture because it's cute. We're going to talk about identifying knee and hip pain. We're going to talk about the anatomy again. We're going to get a little bit more in depth with anatomy next day in a sense of really looking at how the knee works, how the hip works, and how the ankle works, because I think that's a very good foundation to start on appreciating mobility and what it does for us. We're going to talk about causes of pain. Lower extremity side, knee, hip, ankle, arthritis does have a tendency to affect pain to a point. So it is important to start talking about that. We're going to talk about management and prevention. And of course, we're always going to end with a sweet exercise session relevant to the subject that we're talking about with Dr. Shannon. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you soon in about 5 minutes with an exercise session. So just get a water break, go to the bathroom, get your shoes on, and we'll see you in a bit. Thank you.